Hey, welcome to the channel at Bullburger. This week we're going to be doing a different kind of video from the usual podcast, breaking down some of what I think is important going on in the world today. Today is going to be JD Vance's speech. He absolutely torched the EU in a security conference in Munich the other day.
At this conference, of course, to discuss security, and normally we mean threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense, the threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values shared with the United States of America. Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too.
So what happened in Romania? Quick breakdown from this Politico.eu article. About 25,000 pro-Georgescu TikTok accounts burst into action in what Romanian analysts said was a well-coordinated attempt to sway the election in his favor.
We've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values. We must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those things are certainly connected. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content.
So what's going on in Brussels? Well, close to 100,000 protests as Belgium plans to cut social services and a strategy to reduce debt. Similar to what's going on in the United States, Belgium is in a massive deficit. Right now, if we look to this article, their deficit's totaling 100% of their GDP, putting them among the worst 27 nations of the EU. So along with this, the city of Brussels responded by leaving X. So the reasons that they left X were cited as follows. They cited that the reach of the messages of the city is limited, while misinformation and hate speech continue to grow due to insufficient moderation. These developments do not align with the fundamental values of respect, inclusivity, and transparency that the city upholds. That is why the city of Brussels has decided to leave X as of 10th February 2025. This decision reflects its commitment to prioritizing online communication channels that foster constructive and respectful exchanges.
Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief.
Moving to the example given with Sweden, we're going to use this source from the BBC here. Swedish police had given Mr. Momika permission for the protest in which he burnt the holy book, in accordance with the country's free speech laws. The government later pledged to explore legal means of abolishing protests that involve burning text in certain circumstances.
And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution.
While doing my research into Adam Smith Connor, there's not too much I found that I really need to add to what JD Vance said. He was ordered to pay $9,000 in fines. He violated an order that said that he couldn't come within 150 yards of that building. One thing I do want to talk about, though, and this is what I feel was not worth pulling up an article for, was how I feel this is almost paradoxical in nature. You have one person that's arguing, or one side, rather, that's arguing the freedom to their body, the freedom to make a decision unabated. The main problem with this being that the protesters were abating any citizen that felt they might want to have an abortion. Well, you're also trying to say that you do not have the freedom to protest. And in this case, I think the absurdity of it being that he was holding a silent vigil and he was not disturbing anyone. Well, he was within, I guess, the 200 or 150 meter radius of that building. He was not technically disturbing anyone with what he was doing. It just seems kind of like a senseless abuse of power in this instance. I'm sure that there have been protests near there that have not been as peaceful. When I did read about it, I found out that 75% of the residents supported this 150-meter safe zone around this abortion clinic. So there is public support in the area for this. However, obviously there's public opposition, or there wouldn't be people out there protesting. And obviously the loudest voices are typically the ones heard the most. Ironically, this person ended up having a much louder voice by not speaking at all. Holding his silent vigil and getting arrested brought more attention to what he was protesting than any protester out there yelling hateful slurs.
Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizen suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
I think JD Vance was challenging a lot of the EU there. So I figured I'd pull up the First Amendment for the Constitution so that we could all get a little refresher on this beautiful, beautiful law, which states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. That one sentence right there protects the press. It protects your ability to speak freely of the government, regardless of whether you think they're doing a good or a poor job. In America, we get to tell our politicians exactly how we feel about them. Now, the problem we've had lately is that a lot of them don't listen to how we feel about them until Americans start actually voting for how we feel about them.
Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with.
So getting right back into JD Vance's definitely most controversial topic during the speech, and that's going to be the Romanian elections. As especially with direct ties, if you look at exactly what went on to the accusations of both 2016 and 2020 election meddling in America, you can see how you can draw those parallels. And the parallels that he's drawing to all other European Union countries. It's basically a warning saying, look, your democracy is not as weak as you want it to seem, but it is vulnerable. And when the people see that their vote is no longer counted in this round of the elections, regardless of whether or not they voted on good or bad information, they voted because everything I've read that the vote count was accurate. It was just that the people were given bad information through about 25,000 TikTok accounts, which I did not read if they were bots. I'm going to assume, when told otherwise, that these are bot farms, bot accounts that are just given content to post and that do. And that these bots, for a few $100,000, were able to post propaganda that was able to make this man popular and to overtake the incumbent party and win the election, basically. And that is grounds to annul the election and to redo it. It's one of those things where, I hope that the election takes place and I hope that it goes as it should, but I certainly can see how that might affect the people who are voting in, not in the way that necessarily people may think. This pro-Russian leader might end up getting a larger following than he otherwise would have won by now, because the people are going to see, oh, well, they just don't want this man in office, and there's obviously a reason why. He's going to save us from them. That might be the view of the people, and he might end up getting an even larger following. It's all just a term for an opportunity for more propaganda and for more hot button debates, I guess. But with that, I think it's a good spot to end this video. There is going to be a part 2 to go over the last half of the speech. Unfortunately, with how long the speech is and how much stuff there is to break down, it's just going to have to be a 2-part video. Well, y'all, I think that's going to do it for today. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like, share, subscribe, comment. Everything helps out. We're just trying to get the channel to grow. This is a new format that we're trying here, so if you like it, again, please make sure to let me know. Dropping a like always helps as well. Again, thanks for tuning in. If you stuck with us till the end of the video, you're a real trooper, and I appreciate it. So long, till next time.